Hello and welcome to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. I'm Dino Verrelli, founder and CEO of Project Purple. We have an exciting interview coming up with a very special guest after a few quick updates. Since 2010, we've contributed close to $5 million and counting towards pancreatic cancer research efforts. We've also allocated over $1,500,000 worth of aid to more than 1,500 patients and families through our patient aid programs. Your monthly or one-time gift can improve patients' lives through research and assistance programs. You can donate now at projectpurple.org. Pancreatic cancer does not rest, and neither will we. Your support is truly appreciated. If you're looking to get involved in one of our events, whether that means joining a run team, participating in a virtual run walk, group fitness, golf, or anything else you can think of, visit projectpurple.org/events to learn more. Let's meet our special guest coming to us. I have a saying, usually I say all the way, but not really that far because it's drivable. Just you're like a neighbor to us here, but coming to us from Rhode Island, pancreatic cancer survivor and author Marla Schreffler. Marla, welcome to the Project Purple podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And we were just playing connect the dots a little bit. I went to college in Rhode Island, so I know Rhode Island well. We've done quite a bit in Rhode Island, actually. We've done some stuff with Roger Williams in the past. And we've got some, we like to call our survivors superhumans. So you might hear that term through this conversation. We've got some superhumans. We actually did our Survivor Summit, Superhuman Summit in Newport just last November. So that was a shift for us. Every year we try to get as many of our superhumans together throughout the country, and Newport was our destination. Last November, we had spectacular weather. One of the days, as you know, in Rhode Island, the weather can change pretty fast.
Day to day.
Yeah, day to day, right? But Newport, when it's nice, is glorious, right? And when Newport's bad, I think it wasn't cold, it was just wet. It could be miserable, but I think we were able to squeeze in most of the activities in very good weather. But I love Rhode Island. It's a state that's very near and dear to me because it's going to college there and everything that it involves. So welcome to the podcast. As I mentioned, the first segment of the podcast is always your opportunity to kind of bring us on your experience, your journey, how you define it is totally up to you and acceptable. And I'm excited to hear your story. As I mentioned, we met via email, and I know you've written a book, and you're local to us. So I'm excited to hear your story. I'm sure your friends and family already know a little bit about the story, but feel free to take us wherever you want to go. With that, the microphone is yours.
Thank you. I actually have an interesting story. Because I've been spending some time on Facebook forums for Whipple warriors and learning about their stories, and mine, I guess, is a little different. So I want to start out just giving a little bit of background about myself. So before any of this started, I was a pretty healthy person. Interestingly, I had a fear of doctors and medical procedures. I had a fear of blood tests. I had a fear of going to dentists, any kind of a doctor. Of course, that has all changed since having pancreatic cancer. I also want to say that I'm very much in tune with my body. So because I'm a pretty healthy person, I'm pretty much in touch with any kind of changes, and I'm very, I guess, sensitive to changes. So what happened in April of 2024, I started having blurry vision. That's the first thing that happened. And I thought, oh, that's a little weird. So I went and had my eyes checked, and they said, oh, wow, your prescription has dramatically changed, and they changed my lenses. And I went on my merry way. And then all of a sudden, I'm also working, by the way. I was working full time, just about full time. I'm a school psychologist. And so I was working in a high school, and I started doing weird things with my mouth. I said, I have dry mouth. Why is that? I really started noticing that. And I called my primary care doctor, and she said, well, I think we probably need to do a blood test. She did a blood test. And 11:30, the night after I took the blood test, I got a phone call at 11:30 at night from a nurse. She says, "You have to go to the hospital right now." And I said, "What?" Like, I was like fast asleep. She said, "You have a glucose level of 535 and you have an A1C of 13 point something." And I still didn't understand numbers at that point, but I do now.
Mm.
And so I just sort of ignored that and went back to sleep. And then my doctor said at 7 o'clock in the morning, she called me. She said, "You have to go to the hospital right now. You have a very dangerous, elevated, glucose level." So I went to the hospital, didn't fight with her. And I have no idea what they did to me. I mean, this is an issue that I have with hospitals sometimes running tests and doing things with you that you are not aware of and you don't know why they're doing them, even in the wonderful hospital that I ended up at. So they did some kind of saline solution. And the doctor in the ER said to me, he said, "You're going to be just fine. You just need to lose a few pounds." I will say that at that time, I'm 5'2", so I'm pretty short. And at the time, I was about 130 pounds. So I might have been slightly overweight, but certainly not heavy. And that's what he said to me. My doctor then put me on insulin and she got a glucose monitor for me. So here I was trying to negotiate all the issues associated with diabetes. And as we went on from April until June, my members of my family were saying, something doesn't seem right. Don't you think you should see a specialist? So I mentioned that to her, and she said, "Well, I want to get you stable. So let's not do that yet." But over one weekend, when she was obviously not with me, all of a sudden I started losing a lot of weight over the weekend, like
Mm.
scary. Like all of a sudden, I was just dropping weight and I wasn't trying to diet. And I started feeling abdominal pain. I used to have insurance that allowed me to contact a company called Teledoc.
Mhm.
And what that is, they have doctors on call and you tell them your issues and they give you about 15 minutes. And I spoke to one of the physicians. She said, "How come your doctor didn't order a CAT scan?"
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I called my doctor on Monday and she said, "Okay, I guess I have to order a CAT scan."
CAT scan. Yeah.
And she did. It still didn't show anything. I mean, it didn't show the tumor. What it showed was an atrophy of my pancreas. And a lot of my story is just serendipitous. Like, I just think I have a guardian angel watching over on me. The year before, I had kidney stones, and they actually did a CAT scan so they could compare the CAT scan that I had
Mm.
the year before to the current one. And they just said the shape had changed. And I said, "Well, let's
Shape
study
of what? The
my
pancreas?
pancreas." So I read the notes. You see, the thing that I didn't know, and now I know, is that when you get tests, it goes to your patient portal even before your doctor gets to see it. And that's a federal
Mhm.
law. You have to. So I was reading the notes and I said, "I don't understand this." They said it has a different shape and still didn't get it. My doctor just happened to have a colleague who moved to Mass General from Fall River, happened to be an oncologist. And
Mhm.
she said, "Can I share your CAT scan with him?" And I said, "Sure." So she did. He happened to be part of a group that had a surgeon, a radiation oncologist, plus himself. And they all looked at my scan, and I still wasn't a patient of theirs, which was kind of incredible. So they all talked together and they said, "We don't feel good about this. You need to have an MRI." Had an MRI. The next day, and I talk in my book about flashbulb memories. It's like, you know vividly everything about that moment when you get the phone call. So the oncologist called me at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and he said, "We found a tumor in your pancreas." I said, "What?" Here I am, this very, very healthy, energetic person. I live a healthy lifestyle. I don't smoke. I drink moderately. And he's telling me I have a tumor in my pancreas. And it was a total shock. It was a total shock. And then I was just numb. I think I froze. I told my husband I can't talk to this doctor. So I handed him the phone. And interestingly, they had talked amongst themselves because they all three knew now that I had a tumor and they were going
Mhm.
to do a Whipple. And I said, "What is a Whipple?" And and I actually, my husband and I were on our way to a wake, as it turned out. And I'm in the car still dealing with this crazy, crazy news. And
Oh, Marla, so they did this all over the phone?
Um, the oncologist told me over the phone
Yeah.
that they found a tumor in my pancreas, and I
So at
didn't.
this point, they
Yeah,
didn't say like, "Hey, you have pancreatic cancer." They're just
nope,
saying it's a tumor
right,
that, probably should get more, diagnostic on and like
yeah,
possibly have this Whipple to get it out.
and
So
and then they reversed their decision. I came out of the wake, and I got a call from my doctor because she said the oncologist was trying to call me, and I wasn't answering the phone, so she called my husband on his phone and she said, "Oh, they've reversed their decision. They're not going to do a Whipple. They want you to go through chemo, radiation,
chemo,
and then
yeah.
Whipple." And I still didn't understand what is going on. I mean, what do you mean?
Yeah.
So it was like a total shock. And I really didn't know what to do. I didn't understand actually the seriousness of this. My husband did. He was pretty upset. And I'm thinking, cancer I know is bad. It's bad to get any kind of cancer, but pancreatic cancer. And of course, now I've done lots of research on this, and now I realize what a horrible, difficult disease this is to detect because the symptoms don't come out until much later. Like, they look for yellowing of the skin, and I didn't have that, and I didn't have any of the symptoms that come up later. And of course, when those symptoms come up later, that's unfortunately when probably the tumor has metastasized and has impacted other organs. So I was so incredibly lucky to trust my gut on this, to get a second opinion. And I just want to mention, when I look on the forums and I hear people talking about their doctors being very dismissive
Mhm.
of their symptoms, and if I learn one huge lesson in all of this is you got to trust your gut. And I have just one little anecdote to mention too at this point. I told my friend about this, and she said, "Well, I have a friend who's a doctor who also had pancreatic cancer, who also ended up going to Mass General. And he was so lovely. He called me and he said, as a doctor, he had trouble to convince his doctors to do scans. They kind of were
Yeah.
dismissive of him. So I'm thinking this happens a lot, that some doctors are very dismissive. And we've heard some really horrendous stories up at the hospital about other people getting to it too late. My tumor was very small, less than an inch, from what I understand. Very, very tiny. And so then, of course, the next step was to decide if it, no, to figure out if it was cancerous or not. And I know other doctors sometimes don't do this test, but I had an endoscopic biopsy.
ERCP. Yeah, the ER. Yeah.
Again, I was incredibly lucky. I ended up having the head of the department doing that endoscopy because, from what I understand, you must be incredibly careful when you do that because if the needle that they insert um, punctures the tumor, it could disperse and spread it to other
Correct.
organs.
Correct.
So when I woke up, he immediately told me it was cancerous, but I suspected it was because the oncologist said, we're pretty
Hmm.
sure it's cancerous. So it wasn't a huge surprise to me. But when I read his notes, um, he said that he went through 3 tries. That's what he used. I think that was his terminology until he was able to get a sample and nothing happened. The tumor didn't disperse. It was done extremely
Hmm.
carefully. And then I had no time to think, and they did not waste any time. I was treated as if I was a more advanced case of
Yeah.
pancreatic cancer, so I had the full-blown
So
protocol,
you go chemo, radiation, then Whipple.
and I was lucky to have the Whipple. I
Yeah.
now I've done a lot of research
Yeah. Yeah.
for my book, and because it was in the head of the pancreas, I was healthy. I'm trying to think all the other factors. Oh, there's lots of other, there's a whole bunch of factors, tumor markers that they do to determine if you're eligible for the Whipple.
Yeah, most doctors, unless you're like a lower stage, they don't really and again, I think statistically it's like 1 in 5 still. So yeah, like it's like hitting the lottery, if you can have the Whipple, right? And a lot of people start out not in that space and then get to that space. But again, it's tough because some people don't respond positively to the chemos, right? Or they don't
Right.
have non-metastatic disease. So it's tricky. It's really like, to your point, very fortunate, that they got it when they got it. It's just kind of interesting, like I want to jump in here and we'll get back to the Whipple here, but I have a term loaded questions, and this is a loaded question, meaning that
Okay.
there's no right or wrong. It's just the answer is the best answer, which is your answer. So the loaded question is like, hindsight being 2020, of course, and the purpose of this exercise not to beat you up, but like beat yourself up, I should say. When you think back prior to, because sometimes even though this tumor was found at an early stage, I've talked to some of the leading scientists in the world, and they're like, these things are in there for 10 years before they actually show signs and symptoms, before patients become symptomatic
Right.
of the disease, right? So, again, hindsight being 2020, if you look back the 10 years prior, was there any it sounds like you were you fall into this category of like this late onset diabetes cohort that, is a new kind of not a diagnostic, but like one of these like triggers that we're starting to see, along with like high risk, people with pancreatitis, and now this late onset diabetes, which is like 50 plus, healthy, like your BMI, like you were like, yeah, you were like but your BMI, like you're not obese. So like that's not your weight and your height are in line where you should be. I mean, I know like the BMI standards are like, wow, you got to be like 110 pounds or whatever it is. I think some of those are like a little far-fetched because
Right.
like the pyramid is like, but also the pyramid tells you to eat carbohydrates and Fruit Loops, and those are healthy. So like I don't always trust those numbers because I feel like what you're telling me, you're kind of right in alignment where probably you should be from a healthy average, average person. Um, so yeah, so it's kind of interesting, I guess, then looking back, like there was never anything like,
No, and I actually think that the this incredible rapid onset of diabetes was actually the first and only trigger for the tumor. I'm absolutely convinced of it. I I have since done some research about diabetes, and I hate to be linked up with type 2 diabetic people because typically, and not always, it's associated with having a lot of weight.
yeah,
But In my research, I found that there is this subtype of type 2. I think it's called type 2C or 3C, which indicates that, that a precursor of pancreatic cancer is sudden, unexplained onset of diabetes, along with abdominal issues.
Mhm.
Blurry vision, I don't think ends up in that category, but I do believe that was part of it. I think that was the first initial indicator. And I've since seen an endocrinologist, and he says, yes, vision is definitely part of that diabetic cycle because, there's certain um, signs in the eye, blood vessels that would
Yeah.
indicate that there is an issue of diabetes. So he said that's something that you really need to check out. But I think it's because I'm very super sensitive about any changes in my body, and just this scary glucose level. I mean, who has a glucose level of 525? I mean, it's absurd. And I think just trusting my instincts and getting a second opinion from another physician, even though I trusted my doctor and she has been phenomenal with me, but I think you have to trust your gut. I think you have to be intuitive about that.
Yes, and I think that's hard for a lot of people, Marla. And I think, something that you mentioned before, these are not excuses, but I come from a patient advocacy standpoint. We're patient advocates, and we're also disruptors in the system. And that's where I think like the podcast and particularly your story so far, like, you're advocating for second opinions, and you got to kind of step out of your comfort zone for some people because they may be really uncomfortable. Sometimes the system's not working in our favor. And how do I mean by that? And it's not anything malicious and it's not anything done intentionally, but I think our medical system here and we have amazing medical partners. And I say this to them all the time because we're, again, patient advocates, right? Like we want what's best for the patient. But I think the system, like the US medical system, is flawed in a lot of ways. There's a lot of positives that come through it, but I think there's still some negatives, and that's why we're here to help people get through that. That's why we're sharing stories. But I think a lot of people go into it thinking, "Hey, like they've got all my intention, like they're gonna take care of me," and I'm telling you, they're not. And I'm not trying to be like I got a lot of really close friends that are doctors, so like it's nothing against them, but just like anything else, I think you just have to like really advocate for yourself, and especially when it comes to cancer care, you've got to like really put yourself. You got to be really selfish when it comes to these doctors
Absolutely.
and clinicians and systems, because it's kind of like the don't ask, you don't get, right? Like if you don't ask the right questions, and most people, and this is, I'm not trying to like make people feel bad, but like nobody goes through, like you don't go take a class in college or continuing ed, or you pick up a book about, hey, when you get pancreatic cancer, this is what you should do, right? Like I think we're under this assumption that like, hey, the hospital is going to take care of you, and they will, but I think there's things though that like you need to like understand, and you need guidance or need assistance, or you should, listen to, former survivors and how they like navigated through that. And some people aren't comfortable with like pushing a little bit. If they don't feel comfortable when a doctor gives them an answer, they don't want to push back because maybe that's not their nature, or maybe they just have like this subconscious thought that like, hey, the doctor's always going to do what's best for the patient, and that's not necessarily true in some situations, right? Like there's insurance, there's testing, and let's be honest too, like, and this is one of my biggest gripes, doctors are wrong a lot. Like and what do I mean by that is like, and it sounds like you had, and we're going to continue the story here, but I'll just throw this in there. Like you had a positive experience after the first go around, right? With that second opinion. But
Mm.
we hear all the time, like that, like people like Oh, first doctor's like, yeah, just you got 3 months, get your stuff in order. And like, how do they know that though? Like no doctor has a crystal ball. And I mean, and even the guys that have been doing it for 50 years, they make mistakes. We're all human,
Right.
right?
Right, exactly, and I see this on the forums over and over again about doctors dismissing them or thinking it's something else, or and I just think I think I wrote this in my, well, I didn't write it in my book, but I wrote it on my website, that we need to be directors of our treatment and not just participants. Um,
Yeah.
I I will say that I'm a fairly assertive person, and
Well, you're a
I
school psychologist, so I think you had to be, right?
I
Like dealing
have
with
to be right, and I did question actually all of my doctors, including the surgeon. So, just give you an example of that. I had, by the way, I went to Mass General. It was a short, thank God this oncologist was at
close,
Mass
yeah.
General, but I would have ended up there anyway because I'm a researcher. I mean, that's what I do for my job. And I wanted to find the best hospital, the most experienced doctors. And I tell people that all the time on the forums. Don't go to your, just don't go local. Really try to find a good institution with a good, with good experience, with people that say that they got the best care, the best doctors. And there's no doubt about it. I had the best doctors, the best doctors. The surgeon who I had, who actually very graciously let me use his video explaining the Whipple in my book. He let me have a link to his video, and it's quite, quite good. I had done research and I found that, the stomach is not always necessarily cut into when they do a Whipple. And I learned all about the Whipple and all the things that they do. And I asked him about I'm going to pronounce this wrong, pylorus saving um, action or surgical piece where they don't go into the stomach. And I was reading it to him from my, the research that I done, and he said to me, "But I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to tell you why." And he did. He said, "My results are very, very good, and it's because I do all these different pieces. I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this." And he says, "That's why I'm not going to do that." And I said, "I can accept that. Thank you. That was wonderful." And I have to say, one other amazing thing about him, I'm a very anxious person. And I had been thinking about this Whipple since I heard the word. And for months, despite going through that chemo and radiation, it was always in the back of my head. At some point, I was going to have the Whipple. Although the oncologist said by the time you get there, you'll be so happy to get to the Whipple because it's all going to be over. um, I said that when I get wheeled into the operating room, I don't want to see the surgical instruments. Can you cover them? And he did. He covered the surgical instruments when I was wheeled into the operating room. Who does that? And that actually made a difference. Well, he was great. He calmed me down. He just had such a lovely way about him. And and my oncologist was right. By the time I got to the Whipple, I'm done with treatment and my cancer will be gone, which it was.
What you just articulated, though, that's how doctors should be,
Mm,
right? If a patient, like I'm listening to hear you say that, which is awesome, and Marla, like that is phenomenal, and I'm so excited that hearing your story, having a patient that expresses like, hey, like I have anxiety, I would feel much more better if I didn't see anything. Um, I've had procedures and, whether it's been I've had arthroscopic, I had my gallbladder out, like, like, yeah, you walk down like or they put you on the gurney and like you're awake until they, knock you out, but they don't knock you out until you're actually on the table. And yeah, you see the whole, so like I can imagine for someone with anxiety, that's like a lot of anxiety going on. So like,
My imagination was going
oh,
wild,
it goes
you know?
wild, right? But
You
to
know?
hear you say though, again, from a patient advocate standpoint, that like, hey, like you're able to like be honest and say, like, listen, like this is really an issue for me. Can you just cover it? And then, when I'm out, then you can do whatever you want. Like I'm not gonna know, right? And they're like, yeah, well, that's fine. Like it's just so awesome, right? That is so awesome to hear. Um, and I hope like the audience watching and listening, and this is like I get excited when people we have these moments on the podcast because I've never heard that actually. You're the first person to say that. But I think about that. That's like such a small little thing. Like we're not asking, like we're not changing the doctor's schedule. We're not asking him to change his music or his routine. Just drape it up. Don't let me see it. But that is so impactful, right? Like for someone who may have anxiety about that. And I'm sure there's probably people listening to this that maybe hindsight, like they've gone through the Whipple and maybe that last image before they're going to be, knocked out. I don't know if I should use that term, but sedated maybe,
Yeah,
and go to sleep. Um, Knocked out sounds bad, like they're in a fight. That's a negative. So, like, before they're sedated, is that they're seeing all the instruments, right? And just the thought of that, like, holy cow, like this is going to be used on me, and the instruments that they're using, like, you don't want to see that stuff, right? Regardless of whatever the procedure is, I think that's like kind of like I remember I went for a colonoscopy, yeah, and you walk in and you see the whole like, the whole
yeah.
apparatus there, right? Like it's like, oh my God, like you don't want to know what you don't need to know. But that little simple thing, again, is so powerful for both from having a positive experience with your clinician, but from the patient's perspective, right? Like peace of mind and like all that goes into that. And I've always said one of the other things is like from the mental aspect of all this, it's a roller coaster. Right, you
Oh, yeah.
mentioned, you're going to a wake, you get this news, and then you come out of the wake, and now it's totally different, right? So it's this constant roller coaster of emotions, and if you can focus on what you can control, it's so powerful.
That is such a huge piece, and I talk about that in my book. I feel that we're so out of control with something like cancer, and especially pancreatic cancer, because you don't, you have to get through those treatments.
Yeah.
As yucky as they are, you have to get through them. But I think for a lot of the year, it's like, I don't have any control over this. So I tried to find little ways that I could have some control. Like something so I know I don't know if this is silly or not, but like when I had the infusion, they give you, blankets
Mhm.
in the infusion room. Well, I didn't want their stinky blankets. I brought my own from home. And
Mhm.
just that tiny little thing um, just made me feel like I'm using my blanket, not your blanket. And it's making me feel like I have at least a little bit of control over the situation.
Yeah.
I actually told a phlebotomist, the blood picker person, she hurt me. One of them, I've had obviously many, many blood tests, and she
Yeah.
actually hurt me. And I said to my husband, that is the last time that woman is going to get near me. And
Yeah,
he
yeah.
came out, called my name, and I said, I'm going to wait for the next person.
Yeah.
And I said, because I know what a blood test should feel like. I've had a
Yeah.
gazillion of them. And, I knew she did it wrong. And I heard that she does not do a good job with the patients. And so I said, that's it. Never
Skip the
again.
line. I'm not going
Yeah.
to that line.
I'm not going near her. So, but it was my assertiveness, my saying, no, this does not feel right. I have enough stuff that I'm going to go through with the infusion. I don't need a bad blood test before the infusion. I really don't, you know.
So powerful, and it's inspiring, and like I said, I hope the audience, maybe there's someone out there, and this is why we love doing this podcast and sharing these stories, because hopefully someone out there hears that, because I'm sure, and I don't mean this in a bad way, you're not the only person that's probably gotten pricked really bad and no one
Right,
says
right,
it, right? But
right.
I know, like, patients talk. And that's the power of this, like having patients on and talking about those experiences. So it gives hopefully the people that are in it right now, that are going through maybe something very similar, the inspiration and the courage to speak up. So thank you. Back to the timeline. You go through the Whipple.
Mhm.
I assume everything goes as it's supposed to with the Whipple, complications.
Actually, just so many wonderful things happen within. Just stepping back a little bit, when I had the chemo, there's 8 cycles. At the
Mm.
fourth cycle, they do a CAT scan, and they found that my tumor shrunk by
So
time.
chemo's working.
So that was huge for me. It was almost like a pivotal moment in my treatment, because I said, "Oh my God, as bad as these drugs are, and they're awful, they're doing their job." And my tumor shrunk. And I didn't really understand what the radiation was about, because now I since have found out. And the radiation oncologist explained to me what the purpose of the radiation is: to clip off the spikes of the tumor. And he talked about like a centipede, like cutting off the
Mhm.
legs of a centipede. And that's the purpose of the radiation. So when I read the biopsy from my Whipple, my tumor was completely dead. Like when they took it out, it was a non-cancerous tumor at that point.
Wow.
So I mean, it really, really doesn't get better than that. I am just so phenomenally lucky.
So then with that biopsy coming back after the surgery, so was chemo, you didn't do any chemo post? Because usually they
No,
do
no, no. I had the 8 cycles of chemo. Then I had the 28 consecutive days of radiation.
radiation,
Yeah, and by
Whipple,
the way, just I actually spoke to the hospital administrator about this. You get to ring the bell after radiation. How come you don't get to ring the bell after chemo?
chemo.
I think you should ring a bell after
Oh,
chemo.
yeah.
That's just my opinion. But yeah, I had all the typical, the CAT scans, the blood tests, the radiation, the Whipple. But of course, then there's post Whipple issues, which
Yeah.
I was not really prepared for.
So now post Whipple, do you become a diabetic?
I was a
Or
diabetic. That's how
so
I
that
started.
so you started, so you stayed diabetic.
Well, the surgeon had told me that at the 3-month mark, I would know if I was going to be a diabetic forever. He says it takes 3 months post Whipple
Mm.
to make that determination. So, yep, still had glucose issues, but even at that point, they had taken me off the insulin. I'm back on insulin, by the way. So it's been a bizarre post year. I mean, things have just gone up and down. The other thing, he didn't think I was going to have any issues. He was so positive about me. Actually, the 3 doctors said they just could not believe how well I went through all the treatments, and I was like a poster person for pancreatic cancer. Um, so unfortunately, what happened is I started noticing that I was not gaining weight, and I had bathroom issues, and I consulted with a nutritionist, and she thought I probably had an enzyme deficiency. And I had to wait 1 month to convince them to do a test. Even those great doctors, I had to wait a month to do a simple test to see if I had an enzyme deficiency, which I absolutely had. So now I'm in this conundrum because I have diabetes and I have an enzyme deficiency, and the nutritional issues around each one are counterintuitive. You know,
Yeah,
it's like, for instance, when you have diabetes, you're supposed to have fiber.
correct.
That's not what you're supposed to do with an enzyme
Right.
deficiency. So I had to research that on my own to find help around somebody who survived pancreatic cancer and has both an enzyme deficiency and diabetes. Very, very hard to find stuff out there.
So are you on Creon or
I
the
am on Zenpep because at the
Zenpep? Yeah, which
time,
is
it's the same thing.
yep,
I think there are three main enzyme pills. I had that in my book. I just don't remember all the names, but Creon and Zenpep are the two biggest ones. And
yep,
at the time, Creon was not in great availability. So my
yeah, yeah,
doctor said, okay, we'll do Zenpep. And even that's been tweaked because I'm now 1 year post Whipple, and I'm still having issues trying to stabilize the issues with the enzymes, the issue with the diabetes.
yeah.
It's a small price to pay. It's a little irritating, I have to say. I'm not thrilled about having to inject myself 3 times a day and taking those pills, but
There's no cancer.
I have no cancer. I thought I was gonna change a lot after this. I actually think I'm a better person having gone through this because I handled it. I didn't considering my huge phobia of medical procedures and going to doctors and you name it, I had to go through it, because
Yeah,
even in the hospital, and this is a negative thing that I have about the hospital, they did lots of different tests on me and they didn't talk to me about what they were doing. And I think like I said, I'm a usually assertive person, but I think post Whipple, it just kind of laid me out,
mhm,
it's not easy coming out of a Whipple. And I just don't think I had the energy to, what are you doing? Why are you doing that test? With and
yeah.
not communicating with me. And I'm thinking, yeah, I know I'm a patient and I know you're the people doing it, but there has to be a reason why you're doing these tests. Could you let me know? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of trial and error right now then,
Yes.
in terms of
Yes.
trying to figure this out.
Yes. Yes.
Um, Couple questions here for you, Marla. I know going to MGH, and I'm sure the audience is waiting for this question because I ask it often. Genetics, any genetics, anything that came back? I'm sure they
Uh,
ran a full panel, so
they
nothing
did
there.
the germline testing, because they're looking for BRCA
Yeah,
issues, and, they ran 29 genetic tests on me.
yeah,
Um 0 mutations, even for pancreatic cancer. So there was no
yeah,
evidence of any mutation of any gene. And that's good news for my kids,
yeah, yeah.
So I immediately told my son and my daughter, I did not have any mutations. And so that's good
So they're
news for
good.
you
Yeah.
too. Yeah. And it's good news for me, so I asked them, I said, so how did I get pancreatic cancer? Why? I still don't know why. They don't know why. Um, I have a feeling
Sporadic risk. There's
I think
you're part of
yeah,
that 80%. If you look at the statistics, so here in the United States, it's like 10% are genetics, 10% are the IPMN cohort, which are those people who have cysts on their pancreas, and some of them, become cancerous and others don't. And then there's 80% that are just sporadic risk, and we just haven't figured it out yet, right? And so that's like the big push with research is like, where do those people, like a case like yourself, like you have a clean bill of health, you don't have a family history of the disease, there's nothing genetically there. I think, like, I hope, I shouldn't say I think, I hope that, with progress with the sciences that, eventually, like, we do find more, markers or more links, to this,
But
which
there actually is. So this was exciting for me in the middle of my treatment. In the year that I was treated, they found a blood test that can detect the evidence of pancreatic cancer before it gets bad. And it was in under FDA guide, they still hadn't endorsed it when
yeah,
I went
through
through
the
the training,
trial.
but it is now. It is now an FDA approved blood test that will, so what the point is that they're trying to get people to agree to take this test because it's
Hmm.
just a blood test to see if they may have any of the anything in their body that might indicate that they're at risk for pancreatic cancer. And I think that is amazing that they have done that. And the fact that it was in trial when I was going through treatment and it's been approved now, I think the the AI machine learning um, trials that they're doing now, clinical trials all over the world, um, are just amazing. So I believe in my lifetime things they're going to get so much better at early identification and treatment. I have
I
a
hope so
strong
sooner than later, Marla. I
yeah
hope so. I hope
yeah.
so. Um, let's shift here. I want to talk about the book. So where along this experience, this journey, did you come up with the idea for a book?
My daughter.
Is
um,
she a writer?
she actually is an editor of a magazine.
Okay, there we go. All right, because I was like school
And
psychologist. I'm like,
so she said, Mom, you need to write your story. And you need to write your story to help others. And my husband gave me a lot of encouragement. And I have to tell you, my Whipple was last January, a year ago, and August, in 1 month, I wrote my book.
wow.
And what I did is, because I did so much research about the why of the treatments. I mean, yeah, we know we have to, going to pronounce this wrong again, fulferinox is the
Yeah,
cocktail.
yeah,
Not
yeah.
everybody gets that. There are other chemo cocktails.
Probably the most common though. I
I
think like
think
for
it is.
most, yeah,
And I researched and I found that it was only utilized in 2012. I'm thinking 2012 and now 226. I was lucky enough to be somebody who could benefit from that scientific
hmm hmm
advancement. And it, I, like I said, I just think maybe it was just all meant to be. I don't know. That I just think that I was here at the right time, had the right people around me, and the book is to help guide people in their understanding of what they can expect, how they can cope, little things they can do to make things better. So I just wrote a few things down, like Duralesta is a shot that they give you after your infusion is completed, your one cycle of infusion. So
to
the
boost
first
your
time
white blood cell count. Yeah.
it's supposed to boost your immune system. So the first time they gave it to me, it burned like heck. I'm thinking, I just had my infusion. I had that lovely 5FU pump that I had to wear, and they're injecting me with this Neuralesta, and it's burning. Well, one of the nurses told me the reason why it burns is because it was taken out of the refrigerator and wasn't warmed up.
Mm.
So that's one thing that I learned that I put in my book. Here's another thing I think other people out there need to be aware of. When I got my very first cycle of infusion, they interlaced the chemo with a solution, a saline with it was sugary.
Mm.
I am traveling from Rhode Island to Boston, and on my way home in the parking lot that is Boston, I don't, people out there know about how bad Boston can be. My sugar levels,
Bikes, right?
it was so scary, and I had no idea they put a sugary solution. So I had to be vigilant every cycle and say, "Are you sure there's no sugar in that solution?" Little things, taking out the Neuralesta from the refrigerator and warming it up. I mean, they may seem like little things, but when you're a patient and
Yeah,
everything,
those are big deals.
for me, it was,
Yeah,
it was like, yeah, it's not burning now. Now, now I can take that Neuralesta shot. Now I can go home and not worry when I'm in my parking lot in Boston going to Rhode Island that my sugar is going to spike.
yeah. It's powerful stuff. Um, Next question, I got 2 questions left, and then we're gonna share where our audience can connect with you, learn more about your book, and hopefully buy the book as well. This is a loaded question, and, it's not one answer, but, given what you've gone through,
Mm.
how you dealt with your experience, what's some advice you would give someone who's listening to this that maybe just got diagnosed as they listen to this? Like, what are some like keys? And I know with the book, we probably would say, get the book.
No,
Um,
no, no. I'm, I just feel I am so grateful, so lucky, and I do want to give back. And I think, and the reason why I wrote the book is to give hope to people.
mhm,
You know, you tell people that you have pancreatic cancer, which happened to me. I told in the beginning, and then you could see in their face their response, and then they would kind of tell me somebody they knew who died of pancreatic cancer. That's not really helpful to me. I don't want to know about people who die. I want to give hope. And I think, not that my experience is going to be somebody else's experience, but there are things that you can do to feel like you're more in control, that you're going to get through this, that there are positive things you can do to make it easier, because it's a tough treatment. I'm not going to minimize what I went through. The chemo was yucky. I have to say, I really hated the chemo, and radiation wasn't a big deal. I didn't think there was anything really bad about that. Post Whipple, yes, that was tough because I didn't know what to eat. There were a lot of nutritional issues, but I think when I wrote in my book, is the three things is acceptance that you have this, and and understanding that you can have control. Being accepting of the disease doesn't mean that you can have some control. So I think that, humor, those are my three big things: was humor, acceptance, and positive thinking. And there is actually research out there that if you do have positive thinking, it can help in your recovery. And I think that's very powerful because that's something you can do. You know, it's something you can do. And that's what I did. I accepted help. I told people what I needed. Um I I said some pretty stupid but corny things to the doctors. They laughed, I laughed, and I just felt so much better having done that. You know, and I think that's what you need. You need to just put one foot in front of the other and know that you're going to get through it.
Marla, that's a home run, as we say on this podcast. And as I mentioned in the beginning, maybe we didn't hit record on this, but I've interviewed, I don't know, it's in excess of like 150 survivors, and there's some real tenets that we have seen from those that have lived um, a very high quality of life while going through this thing. And some of the things that you just mentioned are like spot on, so I really appreciate you, first of all, allowing us to share the journey but also being open and also for writing the book because someone called me the other day and was like, "Hey, I'm writing a book, another survivor." I was like, you know what? I think that's fantastic. The more books that are out there, let's flood the whole, Barnes and Nobles with books of survivors from pancreatic cancer because that's what the space needs. My last question, and this is always the last one, we save this for last. It's always the hardest, I feel, because there's no right or wrong to it. And again, it's the loaded of the loaded questions. Given your experience, how do you define pancreatic cancer? What's your definition of it?
Ooh, my definition of pancreatic cancer. Um, a tough disease that can be overcome if the right ingredients, I don't know if that's the right word, are available. I think again, the most important thing is to get it early. I mean, that is just so critical. And also, I'm finding people don't necessarily go to the best doctors, they go local. I mean, I live near Fall River. It will be a cold day before I let anybody in Fall River near me. Seriously. I mean, I went to Fall River when I had the saline solution with the diabetes, and he said, lose a few pounds. That should give you a clue about how great they are down here. Find an experienced doctor, that's, a surgeon who has lots of experience with it. Yeah, it is a really tough disease. It is not easy to get through, but you can get through it.
Powerful stuff. I love it. Last thing here, someone watching, listening, let's share where they can get your book first, but
Okay.
also where they can connect with you if someone wants to reach out to you and talk to you a little bit more about your journey.
Oh, I'm absolutely open to that. I actually have my own website, my author website on Wix, and it's www.pancreaticsurvivorwarrior.org. And you can actually purchase the book from there, but it is also on Amazon and actually unlimited in the ebook version and as a paperback. So that's what it looks like. Status
Warrior
Warrior
Woman.
Woman. I
I love
My
it.
sister got me a T-shirt that said Warrior Woman, and then I thought that's a good title for the book. And actually, the it's a lotus blossom, which is very symbolic of strength and resilience and optimism. And that's what I'm trying to convey.
Awesome. Marla, thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share your journey and for being a guest on the Project Purple podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening and hopefully watching to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. That's a wrap of another episode of the Project Purple podcast. Thanks for watching and listening, and be safe. And until next time, have a great one.